On June 14th, we finally get to see the return of Kamaru Usman as he takes on the dangerous rising contender in Joaquin Buckley. In this video, I'm going to be going through giving a full breakdown of this matchup. At the end, I'll be giving my winner pick and how I think they get it done. But let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and subscribe. But I think some of the toughest matchups to pick are when you have like the former champion who's kind of on the decline taking on the rising contender, where the one dude certainly isn't at his peak. The other guy probably also hasn't reached his peak, but is on the way up. And you just have like this weird contrast where you don't know if the one guy has fallen below where the other dude is rising up. And I think typically like these fights tend to err on the side of the young rising, fighter, but there are certainly times where the veteran can defend their spot and really end up holding their ground and show that they still have some juice left in the tank. So it'll be very interesting to see how this one turns out. I do think it's important to start off with the recent resume of these guys just to show how they've been trending in some of their recent fights, how they've looked in those performances, and then also the quality of competition. So let's start off with Kamaru Usman here, obviously on a little bit of a skid, 3-fight losing streak, had the 2 Leon fights. First one was going to be cruising to a decision win, ends up getting knocked out in the 5th round. Then in the rematch, he loses a fairly competitive decision, and then he took that short notice fight against Khamzat Chimaev up at middleweight and lost that one. So really like 3 losses. One, he was, I think like a minute away from winning. Another one short notice and still looked decent, like won the 3rd round. If the fight continued, he looked like the much fresher guy. But I think the biggest concern for me is just the overall layoff here. He has not fought since October of 2023. Now, in that Khamzat fight, he did show great submission defense. It's very rare for Khamzat to like take you down, have your back, and for him to not finish the fight, whether that's with a submission or with ground and pound. The cardio looked good. Like it still looked like he could go 5 rounds even after those, grueling first couple of rounds with the wrestling. The fight that honestly gives me the most pause from Kamaru Usman was that 3rd one against Leon Edwards, because we've seen in previous and then subsequent fights from Leon where if you really pressure him, you make him uncomfortable, he can wilt. We saw that in the first or the second, Usman fight where Leon was fighting for the title. And then Leon did pick up, that win in the 3rd one. He picked up a win against Colby, but then Bilal really put the pressure on him. Leon wilted. Same thing with Sean Brady. And so in that 3rd Leon fight, we did kind of see a very tentative Kamaru Usman. Now, I do think a part of that could be that he was coming off like that vicious knockout, right? He didn't want to run into something, but still, right? It seems like with what we've seen out of Leon, that was a very winnable fight from Kamaru Usman, even if that wasn't, prime Kamaru in that 3rd matchup. So, like I said, quality of competition, very, very strong, has shown some good things, but also some potential areas of concern, and then also just the extreme layoff. Then for Joaquin Buckley here, pretty much like the total opposite. He is 6-0 since moving down to 170. He knocked out Andre Fialho, picked up a decision win against Alex Morono, knocked out Vicente Luque, a decision against Nursultan Ruzaboyev, and then back-to-back KOs against Wonderboy and Colby Covington. The Colby one was due to a cut, but that fight was not aging well for Colby Covington. And then that most recent fight, just super dominant against Colby. I know Colby's also out of his prime at this point, but I do think that was Buckley's best showing. Just a super complete performance against someone who at one point, right, like was nearly winning the belt against Kamaru. Let's move over into breaking down these guys' styles, their skill sets. We'll start off with Joaquin Buckley here, and he just has a super powerful frame for the welterweight division. He honestly still was super powerful up at 185, but he's no longer super undersized. At welterweight, he's 5'10 with a 76-inch reach, so maybe a little bit on the shorter end, but really long arms for his frame. And then obviously the power is super prevalent. He's a southpaw, likes to throw in combination, big hooks, uppercuts, also mixes in some powerful kicks. Not really someone who's going to attack the legs a ton. Those kicks are typically going to the head or to the body. He really likes to rip his body shots. I think that's going to be an interesting weapon in this fight. And he has proven to be more effective as a wrestler down at 170. He landed 4 takedowns against Wonderboy, 4 takedowns against Nursultan Ruzaboyev. He's also shown some solid takedown defense. Colby Covington went 1 for 8. And even like the moments where he was getting controlled, it was kind of him, maybe against his best interest, like trying to still remain in the wrestling. Like He probably should have just been avoiding those, situations altogether. But I think the big thing that stood out from his takedown defense was just his physicality. Like Colby would get in decently deep on his hips, and Joaquin Buckley would just overpower him. And, it like didn't even matter that Colby had a decent shot. I will say durability, a little bit of a concern. He's been knocked out in 4 of his 6 losses. 3 of those 4 did take place at middleweight. So I think going against dudes who hit a little bit softer, also the range is just completely different. I don't think he's going to have the same durability concerns down at welterweight, but is something I will point out. Now let's talk about Kamaru Usman here. I think he's interesting because his style is definitely kind of developed throughout his career. When you look at like pre-title Kamaru Usman through pretty much like the Tyron Woodley win, maybe even into the Colby Covington fight, but probably cut it off at that Woodley win, he fought with a high pace, was super clinch, wrestle heavy. You started to see him become more confident in his striking after he started working with Trevor Whitman. I don't think he worked with Whitman before the Colby fight. Obviously, those two just like went to war. I think that fight and the way that played out was just more the fact that he didn't think he could consistently take Colby down. So 2 wrestlers kind of just decided to strike. But you saw in the Gilbert Burns fight, the Jorge Masvidal matchup, landed big shots, found knockouts in both of those matchups. He's primarily orthodox, but can switch stances. Very boxing heavy, not going to throw a ton of kicks. His jab is super powerful, honestly, out of both stances. And he will open up a little bit, but it's a lot of jabs, straights, will occasionally mix in an overhand. He still, even since, getting better in the striking department, he still is going to want to overwhelm you with pressure. That's when he's at his best. Push the pace, set up the takedowns, and still be able to land on the feet. I think I have a couple big questions for this matchup. The first one is going to be if Usman will actually look to push the pace. Like I said earlier on, he fought a very tentative fight against Leon Edwards. I think if he fought more aggressively, that was a very, very winnable fight for him. We did see him push the pace a little bit against Khamzat Chimaev in round 3, but it was after he had already lost the first couple of rounds, so a little bit too little, too late. Joaquin Buckley is not an easy guy to just like overwhelm, put the pedal to the metal and just like rack up a ton of volume against him, because you're just going to be in danger like at all points, right? If you're just on him, he's going to have a lot of windows to land his big punches. I also thought Joaquin Buckley showed a lot of patience in that Colby Covington fight. That was the first time we saw him in a 5-round fight. It obviously didn't go 5 rounds, but he didn't blow a ton of energy early on. He was patient. It did seem like if that fight continued, Colby, who's known for his cardio, Joaquin Buckley would have been totally fine going into those championship rounds. And also just like looking at the way he's built, super muscle bound, you would think that maybe his cardio wouldn't be great. Hasn't shown to be a big concern so far. So I do think if Usman wants to win, he should be trying to push the pace here. But obviously there are risks that come with, leaving those openings for a guy like Joaquin Buckley. I don't think Kamaru Usman's going to come into this fight and win with the big moments, right? Like if this is a lower volume fight where there's going to be a few huge shots landed, I think that's probably going to favor Joaquin Buckley in this matchup. The other big question, and probably most importantly, is just what form of Kamaru Usman are we getting? We've known he's had some of these knee issues for a while now. Even when he was champion, he would talk about how his knees were pretty much shot. But now he's 38 years old, coming off a 20-month layoff. He's going to need to be moving well, having good footwork to avoid these bombs from Joaquin Buckley. I think something that does, kind of benefit Kamaru is that Joaquin Buckley isn't super leg kick heavy, so he's not going to be like beating up the legs. At least that hasn't been his approach. Maybe he incorporates that in this fight, but at least he's not known for just like completely butchering the legs, because that could get ugly for Kamaru at this point. Overall, kind of like my big takeaways here, I struggle to see Kamaru Usman consistently take down Joaquin Buckley and hold him down. Like maybe he gets a few takedowns, maybe there's one round where he's able to rack up some control time. I just think Buckley is too strong, too powerful to consistently get held down by Kamaru Usman. I think with Buckley's power and his explosiveness on the feet, I am worried about Kamaru Usman kind of becoming a sitting duck, especially this version of him, probably not quite as mobile. I think the reaction time is going to be worse as you get older. Like look at that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight. Wonderboy from 5-6 years ago is not getting knocked out the way he did against Joaquin Buckley. Like he still looked good, but you can see he makes one mistake. The reaction time isn't quite there. Joaquin Buckley put his lights out. I'm going to go with a Joaquin Buckley knockout. It would be cool to see Usman turn back the clock. I just don't see it happening. I think this is the young contender kind of getting that big win over the former champ. I'm going to go round 2 KO. I think first round might be a little bit of a feel out process. I don't think Buckley is going to press, but I do think Buckley's going to end up finding the knockout. I think it could be the overhand left, or honestly, the right hook is super, super powerful. I think this is probably the second hardest hitter Kamaru Usman's faced, Tyron Woodley being number 1. I do think Usman's going to get caught here. So my pick is round 2 Buckley knockout. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think Joaquin Buckley picks up the win? You think Kamaru turns back the clock? Let me hear it. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.